Hello, everybody. It is Monday. For most people, it's a holiday. Uh, my company works today. For some reason, my body decided to tell me once again that you can't work. So I'm at home. I feel really, really shitty right now. I think this getting old is really starting to get to me. And I'm really going to have to reevaluate some of the ways I do things, I think. So I'm home. I've been resting and just, had things on my mind, reevaluating a lot of things. But, it's neither here nor there, nor is it really bad. Just got a lot on my mind. So, that being said, now that I've had all my coffee and switched to my orange flavored Powerade, I am going to have a frank discussion on drop shot. The entirety of it, actually, and use of sonar and things of this nature. Now, I'm doing notes as I go along. You're going to see me look down because I have notes on pages. But even people that have jerk baited as a technique, people that have drop shotted as a technique, people that have slip bobbered as a technique, should get something out of this, really. Maybe a fresh perspective. I don't know. I'm just a guy that fishes, and I've done so since I was 5 years old, and I'm 47 in March, this coming March. So, been around a while, done a bit. So I made some notes. The first part of drop shot for me is talking about the rig. Now, before I get into the rods and reels and these type of things, to me, a medium heavy fast action is only for the heaviest of cover. Even in standard cover, I still will have a tendency to use the medium light. In fact, all the drop shotting that I've done for the last month and a half now have been on an ultralight, but it's got a big backbone to it. And the reason is I haven't been able to afford to get another medium light because, well, I have a car payment again. So when I get the chance to get a medium light, it's going to happen. So standard gear to me for drop shot, and probably standard fare for many people, 6 foot to 7 foot max. That's regardless if it's 2-piece or 1-piece. Medium light, fast action tip, spinning rod. I do not use bait casters for drop shot. I will not do it. There's a certain type of sensitivity that a bait caster has that a spinning setup does not. But for a lot of people, it's negated when they do things like drop shot. There are people that are that talented with bait casters. Hey, more power to you. Use what you want. And there are contrary to some bass fishermen's disbelief, there are medium light and ultralight bait cast rods and reels, which is actually kind of funny to me because I'm a bass fisherman, but now I'm an everything fisherman, so it's really not outside of the realm. I mean, there's people that use them even for crappie, so just not my style. If I'm going, 90% of my techniques now are going to be on a spinning setup. It's just less problematic in a lot of ways. There's more versatility in ways that you can cast for accessibility depending on where you're standing, where you're sitting, what have you. And don't get me wrong, I've used bait casters all my life. Round reels, flat, low profile, you name it, I've used them. So I'm not unversed in those methods, and I can cast a mean-ass cast on it. My side and undercast with a bait caster, they should be illegal. I really am that good, and that's not tooting my horn. I've got tens of thousands of casts on a bait caster, so will not use them on drop shot. So that gets that out of the way right off the bat. So my standard, I have a Johnny Morris Carbon Light 6 foot light fast action that is kind of my in between multiple technique ultralight. It's still plenty light, to be considered ultralight, but it's listed as a light. I think most of it has to do with it being more of a backbone. Now, I will use it as drop shot, but I use it for panfish drop shot because I have 2-pound ice line on it. Now, the reason I use ice fluorocarbon is because it's stronger than its monofilament equivalent in 2-pound. That's why I do it. Its knot strength is phenomenal. And if I'm pulling fish out of even, midsummer water on 2-pound line, I want the strongest knot and strongest line I can get. And a lot of times that I'm fishing is not in cover, it's above and around cover. So I'm usually not hanging up too much. The primary rig I have is a custom-made 7-foot. Well, I broke the tip, so 6'8" now. 6'7", 6'8", somewhere in there. Because it was a 7-foot too when I started. With a Daiwa Revros 2500. And I recommend, when it comes to reels, a 2000 to 2500 size max. But I recommend that you read reviews on reels before you buy, because you're going to always have a mixed batch of reviews no matter what make, what price range, anything. Always get as good as you can afford. Just do it. It's better to get as much quality as you can out of purchases of equipment. It just is. That being said, the primary 2500 2000 size area spinning reel that I have is a Daiwa Revros. I have been a proponent of Cast King in the past. I can no longer do so because despite their size classes having monster drags and being pretty smooth, their handles and their bails suck. I'm sorry. I got a Mela 2 in a 1000 size. Monster drag. Man, that thing can pull in a 14-pound channel catfish no problem. But the handle broke after 3 trips to the local pond. And I ended up having to buy the Chinese pressed aluminum set screws for my handles. So I went ahead and got a whole batch. I will not use Cast King anymore. So unless you love Cast King and can take those faults, don't get them. Daiwa, Shimano, Abu Garcia, absolutely. Even the $25 to $30 range Cardinal series of their spinning reels has a phenomenal drag. To me, the power of the drag is not as important as the smoothness and adjustability. Because if you play a fish properly, especially in a certain size range, and you have an outfit that's acclimated to that size range, unless you hook into something really snotty and huge, the drag is not as relevant as how you fight the fish and how smooth the drag is. Okay. Point of fact, I get a new reel, I always pull the drag portion of the spool out. I wipe all the factory grease off because it's nasty shit. And I put on Cal's Reel Grease, which is really well known in saltwater. And I use Impro 7 gun oil. I do not use regular reel oil anymore. It's not slippery enough for me. And I'm spoiled. I've maintained firearms for many years. So I put my military grade type lubes from firearms in my reels, along with Cal's Reel Grease for the heavier grease portions. Makes a huge difference, especially on the drag, because they always grease in between the felt and the washers. So I wipe it off. I'll even use some type of solvent. I have Hops number 9. It's not enzymatic. I usually have enzymatic, but I ran out. And I'll resurface with Cal's Reel Grease very, very lightly. You never want to over grease a drag. There's a difference between smooth and not being able to grab. Okay, that's a very important distinction. And then with line, I go and I find that it's best to stay within the 4 to 8 pound max class. Fluorocarbon for 98% of what I do, because most of it is open water and not inside cover. Mono for 2% of the situations, which would be heavy cover. So I'm a little bit different than a lot of people. A lot of people go a little heavier in the line. I don't do that. And there's reasons for that. With line, and I use fluoro because fluoro sinks really, really quick. Excuse me, I'm about to have a coughing fit. Fuck, I feel like crap. I use fluoro 99% of the time, 98, 99, because I don't worry about the abrasion resistance over the sink factor of the line. It also disappears better than mono in the line, especially this 2 pound. This, now I buy everything on eBay tackle wise usually, and this Bionic, this is the 2 pound I use. Northland makes this Bionic. This is panfish specific 2 pound. It is fluoro, and this is blue camo, so it's got kind of a mottled lighter and darker blue to it. But when it gets in the water, it is invisible. And when you look at the water when you're fishing, it's hard to see it even then. It really is amazing. It really, truly is. That's just on my 2 pound. Usually I have, let's see, 4 pound. Well, I get like $15 to $18 3,000 yard plus spools of whatever type of line I'm using fluorocarbon wise. It's usually Sunline, SC Sniper a lot of times. Just really depends on what's on sale. For monofilament, I use either Cast Kings mono, or I use Silver Thread AN40 line. And I've also used Cast King's fluorocarbon as well, which is actually surprisingly good. And it's not a full fluorocarbon, it's a coated line. So it has kind of the best of both worlds, so to speak. But it's a fairly stiff line. So I try to use it sparingly compared to others. Now, when I first started, I took a break from fishing for a few years from my last wife. And when I started again, the first line I started buying, because it was so dirt cheap, was 2 brands. Bass Pro Shops Excel 4 pound line and that red Cajun line. Cajun line is badass line, by the way. And XL is really good for what it is too. But XL, when it gets memory, is done. You got to do it. You got to take it off. No matter what technique I use, I always replace my line every month religiously. Every couple weeks if I'm fishing heavy, because I fish a lot. So that's it for line. And I'm gonna show things as I go along. I'm just preliminary talking right now. Hooks. This is where I'm gonna start bringing things out. So one of the other things that I don't have on baits, bear with me. One little subcategory that I want to cover, especially with crappie fishermen, crappie and bluegill, really. With the gear and the hooks that I use, the primary hooks that I use, and I've got multiple sizes, so I'm just showing a couple. These are size 6 spin shots. I have size 4, size 8, and these ones are size 2. You'll notice that the spin shots have a swivel. Now, there are a couple other brands that have heavier swivels, but I want the God, I can't speak. I feel so crappy. I want the fish to see as little as the tackle as possible. So even to my tag end with my weight on the end of my drop shot is usually a little longer because of that. Unless they're really voracious and really active. But this is a number 1. I have 5 or 6 of those. I have another pack of the 1/0, which is the wide gap in the spin shot. And I like the spin shot mostly for drop shot because I don't like the idea of tying a hook directly to the line and having a weight below it. I understand that it pulls a certain way and the fish hook up to it. I get it. But I don't have any line twist with these spin shots, right? Because they're on a swivel point. They're free moving. So no matter where you're pulling your bait, it's always straight in line with you back to you. That means that any time they bite, even if it's from the side, you're still perfectly oriented away from yourself. When you're using a standard mosquito hook or other type of drop shot hook, like a circle hook, you have that tendency for it to kind of drag a certain way, even if you're pulling it toward yourself. With the spin shots, are always straight back and forth, and the wire gauge is fairly thin for the size hook, and they're a sickle style hook in the first place. So if you use mosquito hooks and all that, more power to you. They're perfectly acceptable if that's your method. I find size range from, because I go from panfish all the way through bass. Most of the time I use between size 8 to size 2 for crappie size, and I go through size 1/0 actually with the spin shots when it comes to using like the 2 to 3 inch or 3 to 4 inch shad type baits too. But I go from size 8 all the way up to 1/0. I don't do, that's for my finesse style. I don't finesse style. I don't do anything bigger than that until I get into the cover, which is that 2% for me. I rarely go inside of cover. And then I go from 1/0 to 3/0, but it's always the spin shot hooks. That's just my preference. By no means does I mean anybody that does it has to do that. Just for the cost to benefit ratio, I find them fantastic, and you can get them on eBay dirt cheap because people buy them in bulk. They really need to start selling 25 to 30 packs, really. Weights: 1/16 to 1/8 ounce drop shot cylinder and or round for most finesse to normal situations. Number 5 to number 9 for split shot, if you want to. Question mark that somebody asked me, to use a swivel or not. You can use a swivel if you're using a regular hook. To me, if you use a swivel with a regular hook, you're doing better than if you're just using a hook on the line. Because then you're kind of making a pseudo spin shot, kind of. It's not as effective, but yes, if you're trying to keep line twist to a minimum and you want to keep the bait oriented as much as possible, the swivel will work a lot better in a circumstance where you have a heavier bait, but when it's in a more finesse style, it's not going to keep the line twist out like a spin shot would. Okay. Baits. Here we go. Now we get into it. And before I get into the rest, let me show the weights. So I usually use rounds. I don't like the cylinders. These are regular lead. I typically use tungsten. These have that little tiny pyramid thing at the top right here where you put the line in. I wrap it twice. I'm not afraid to lose my whole rig. I can buy more tackle. I don't like popping the weight off. If I'm going to do that, then that's when I break out my my size 5 split shots all the way up to, well, I don't have size 9, but these are like a size 7 right here. Most of the time, depending on my rig, I'll just put a couple of these size 0s on, really. It really depends on how micro I'm going. So yeah, that's that portion. I'm going to put that away for a minute. And we are down to baits. So there's a subject of much discussion on baits. In my bait range, and you can use pretty much any bait and drop shot you want. I mean, you really can. It's very much that versatile. Even though this is on a jig head right now, I use a lot of black with green curlies, and I have those in the sparkle black with red tail. I like the Crappie Max series of curly tails. They really make a good product, actually. I also have like the baby shad versions with like the crawdad color. I find that a lot of the earth tone colors, more of the forage covers are really good, from the shad through the crawdad bluegill colors. They match the forage most lakes have better than those offshoot colors. So it's just the way that I feel. Now, there's a lot of fish that have green spectrums of color, so of course, all of the John Deere green styles will work for your smaller, lighter fare. I have a variety of colors of the crappie flat tails that just kind of flap around. I really like drop shot on these because crappie are very motion sensitive and they key in on things like that, and they will munch the shit out of those type of baits. I mean, like even the kind of the light pumpkin with the white top, you know, they look like certain types of things that they would eat. One of the staple colors that a lot of crappie fishermen use in other baits, the sparkle red with the green tail. These are flat tails, 3-inch. So I've got those kind of things going. This is more of a, this is getting into the 3-inch shad style. These are from Roboworm from Japan. These are kind of the morning dew, darker color. They got kind of a cool like purple through green, purple, blue through green in the bottom. They're like they're really catchy color actually. They're actually really a cool color, and I've gotten some really massive strikes on those actually. And then I've got like the regular like standard black top, white bottom shad, and then those are all Roboworm, by the way. These are the more just kind of dark purple to a lighter bluish white. They don't really look it in the camera, so to speak, but trust me, they're pretty obvious. So that's kind of, you know, the standard fare. I also have paddle tail style. They tend to wiggle a lot, even dead sticked. Crappie love these things, by the way. Strike King and Bass Pro make really good crappie baits. They really, truly do. Lake Fork brand, got those style. They got that little joint in them. They're almost like a little mini swim bait. They move a lot with no motion at all, too. So I try to get, when it comes to these soft baits, I try to get reaction strike oriented primarily. And I always use some type of a scent. Always. Now, if I can get my bag back in order, if we really get into logistics of how things happen, I go all the way with panfish all the way to micro. And I have found that if you are doing really, really light, if you take like one of these micro bugs and that's what you use as your bottom weight, and I'm talking like sub-micro here, you get that teaser, or you get any kind of a jig head that's in a lighter fare with finesse, and you have it on the bottom instead of a regular weight, it brings them in more than just having weight on the bottom. It may be different if you're using the live minnow on a drop shot, because then they see something artificial versus something real, and to me that's a time where I really don't want to do an enticer on the bottom. I'd rather do it soft plastic enticer on the bottom, or a jig head with a live minnow. That's a pretty good one for a double rig actually. And then in the micro class, thanks to my friend Michael Harriman of Juggernaut Custom Jigs, I have really sub-micro. These are 164, I believe they're size 10, and I always get red hooks. They just kind of give that little thing to them. And in these sizes, I use super micro pieces, and chartreuse, white, and black, flat black. Those are my go-tos. They look like maggots, ants, small bugs, and on a micro drop shot, it can be really super deadly. It really truly can be really super deadly. Juggernaut Custom Jigs right here, they are a two-person team. It is Michael and his wife. I'm sure that they can accommodate pretty much anything you would want. They have a lot of bigger jig heads out there, but we're talking about drop shot. I'm just giving a shout out because I always do. And then in the kind of traditional Do Nothing series, I always keep everything in bags in my main bag because I don't want stuff just flying around. I have, and these are from Yum, I have the standard salt and pepper type of standard shaddy type color. I have, and these are 4-inch. I have standard white. White's a pretty good color because it shows up in a lot of water conditions. And then I have the pumpkin and green flake, which is a really good standard color in a lot of different waters. Here in Arizona, it really, color is, it's very much a subjective opinion. The water's not quite as muddy as other states. There's some states where the water's really muddy and visibility really sucks. Visibility typically in Arizona lakes is a lot better than most, and there's just very few periods of time where that's really different. After a monsoon is one of them. After a monsoon is horrible for them. Oh, and this one's destroyed, so I'm going to go ahead and show it. This is like that morning one. See, it's kind of, it's almost a translucent dark chartreuse on the bottom. You can almost see through it, and then it goes into kind of that blue and the purple at the top. It's a really deadly color, by the way. I mean, it really, truly is. Good gravy. I need to throw that one, actually. And then, in the roboworm and other categories, straight roboworms. In this state of Arizona, notwithstanding water conditions, 4.5-inch is a great size for a drop shot. Oxblood light red flake is such a badass color in this state. It really is phenomenal. It's got just this red purpley thing going to it. I really can't describe it adequately. Then of course I've got the shaky heads with the standard clear with the pepper, which are really good. And then I always keep some complement of Zoom brand. These flukes are in there just because I wanted something if I wanted to get heavier and dead stick. These are the salty super flukes. They work really good in Mexico, by the way. Good God, if you ever go to El Salto, get the super flukes and the magnum flukes if you're going to go down there, because if you have them in multiple colors, you're going to go through them. Oh my God, especially on El Salto. With those and worms, magnum worms, Zoom brand, if you're going to bite inexpensively and go anywhere out of country to go after trophy bass of any kind, even peacock, buy Zoom brand. Good God, are they good. Oh my God, my throat hurts. Excuse me for a second before I get into this next segment. Man, I hope I feel better by the morning. I really hate being not being at work. I really despise it. This bag, holy crap. Okay, so I have this tendency to soak my soft plastics in scent and keep them soaked. I can wash my hands off in the lake, or if I have a towel, I can wipe my hands on the towel and I can launder the towel. Don't be afraid to get messy or smelly when you fish. If you're afraid to do that, you're not fishing. Sorry. So my dad, when I get into this bag here, I don't know if anybody remembers per se back in the days of Arizona Outdoors, but my dad was a very big purchaser of their products. There's the right bag. I failed to put one back in the bag yesterday on the boat I was on, and it smelled up my whole bag. And now it smelled up my brand new fucking car. Oh my God, that's so stinky. So he bought a bunch of the baits when they sold out. Now, I know a lot of people bought a lot of the baits when they sold out, and hey, fantastic for you if you did, because their baits were phenomenal. And I asked him a few days ago, could I come and pilfer through his stuff? It's like, oh, I got tons. Go ahead and come through here. He had baits all over. He still has baits. Original Cincos before they were Cinco brand in all the sizes and all the colors. He has do-nothings. He has curly tails. He has culprits all the way back from the mid to late 80s through the early 90s. All saved. So I have the ringtails in flat yellow. If you're in Clearwater, those are nasty. Man, they get hit. I have more of a standard pumpkin seed crawdad color, which is a really great color for Arizona waters, by the way. Anything dark green, pumpkin seed, red flake, crawdad, black flake, any of those veins of colors are really good in this state. Standard pepper green. But these are the colors that they had back in the late 80s, early 90s. They don't make these colors anymore. That's why I took them. Got more of the maroon with the orange tail, which is a pretty badass color, actually. It looks badass going through. These baits look phenomenal going to water. I don't know how they don't get eaten more, but sometimes fish are finicky. This is more of a straight crawdad, no speck in a ring style. The ring styles are kind of different to the fish because they see a certain way, and those rings look like motion to them. Scientists have discovered that things that have segmentation differentiate to a predator fish's senses than others. I have standard black and red. That's a 5-inch. And I even like these colors just aren't made anymore. I have this like really dark motor oil with yellow chartreuse. It's really kind of almost a dark translucent color. I got a lot of those because those work really good. And then of course straight motor oil, flame tail. And then I've got the more translucent maroon with the light tail. And these are more of the clear water colors, by the way. The darker ones with the flamey tails, I use those more for the murky times of water. But truthfully, a lot of time, no matter what technique, the color really doesn't need to be that dark because we have fairly clear water compared to other states, like I said. But I use these all on drop shot, all of them. All of them on drop shot. Now, before I go any further in this, I always only go 1/4 of an inch back from the head of whatever the worm is. With the robo worms, if you get the 6-inch size in that ox blood or any other color, if you bite the first 1/4 inch and then go 1/4 inch in, it like releases some of the salt preemptively. So it kind of works. So now that I've shown you those type of things, depending on the quarry you're going for, 1.5 to 4-inch shad and minnow style. Showed you the 3-inch that I have, and crappie will swallow those easily. Do nothing dead stick types, Yum brand, any of the myriads that are made. 3 to 7-inch max, unless you're punching, cover, and wacky rigging, different situation. Any crappie and panfish type for size 8 to 2 spin shots, or mosquito hooks, like those ones that I showed you, those little micros. I will use those, or the crappie size baits. I won't really go any further in size than that if I'm going in that size of a hook. God, I'm feeling so bad. Now let's go to methods. So it kind of varies depending on time of the year. Our lakes right now here in Arizona, during the midday, they get up to about 66 degrees. They start off around 50, 55, but the sun beats on it long enough, it heats the water up pretty good. You'd really be surprised how the environment and the heat from the sun actually heats up the water of a lake pretty quick. It's actually pretty phenomenal. Straight drop, overcover, and bait balls. There's subject of discussion on a lot of people's parts for this. I like to see on the sonar, whether it's the front or the back of the boat, depending on what kind you have, where that tree is, and you'll see it moving away from you, which means it's already moving off, unless you throw a buoy, marker buoy, or you have spot lock, or you throw an anchor in some side of your boat and know the orientation of that cover. if you're continually moving, like if you have somebody on the front of the boat that's in command of the trolling motor and it's a full movement and you're keeping going, you're not going to be able to do a straight drop. But I like to see the position on the monitor and throw along the perimeter according to what I can see on the screen. 90% of the time I'll hit it. Sometimes I get snagged. Losing stuff happens. It's part of fishing. So I'd rather take the risk and get into something. For example, yesterday, the biggest hit I had, was off of a point right near, I think, was it Ringtail? Right near Ringtail on Roosevelt. We were maybe 15 foot off the shore where it drops off already to 15 to 20 foot. And there were sticks, standing timber coming out, and we'd passed right on the perimeter on one side. So I let my minnow drag behind about 40 foot. I like to leave a bit so it'll kind of sink down. I use my, the rig I was using at the end of the day, I actually have right here. I took one of my number 4 spin shots and took the swivel off and straight snell knotted it up 18 inches to a swivel and a number 5 split shot, just right to it. Number 7 split shot. It's one of my bigger ones. And that's what I was dragging. So I have just enough split shot that it will take it down to depth, and I can have a little bit of line so it'll stay there. If you only throw out 10, 15 feet, you're not going to be able to expect your line, regardless of weight, to really go down to where you want it and drag a certain way. So you've got to give yourself a little bit of line length. And I learned that all the way back in my teenage years with my dad, because we used to go white bass and crappie fishing off the dam at Pleasant all the time. And we went to Roosevelt for crappie. So I learned that pretty quick. And I got absolutely hammered. And it was my fault that I lost that fish. It was my fault. And it felt like a bass. It was so big that if it was a crappie, it was probably the biggest crappie I had ever caught. If I would have caught it, I had a strong suspicion it was a bass. But I lost it because I didn't set the hook right. When you're trolling with a drop shot or any kind of method where you're trolling behind, because my friend that owns the boat, Jim, he was trolling a drop shot and he was also tossing it along the way as well. You can troll a drop shot. It's not against the rule book. And I got obliterated. So if you're going to be trolling, if you have no wind, always stay 1 or 2-ish, even with a drop shot, okay? If you go too fast, they're not going to be able to accurately eat the bait. As fast as they can go, during the winter time especially, they're not wanting to move that much. So you kind of have to slow it down. It got so windy yesterday that we were planted even on 5. So it just was it was a hard day fishing, actually. And I think it might have contributed a bit to me feeling like shit today, actually. So if you're going to, now that I went off on a tangent again, if you're going to straight drop over cover, you want to try to stay on the outside lines and not too much in the middle, because that's going to get you a lot more snagged. And depending on the size of the drop shot, if I go around cover, I like to do the natural colors or natural bait and just kind of dead stick it and keep it in the zone. Because if it's not moving that much and it's in their face, they have more of an aptitude of snapping it at that point in time, because it's just in there and they know it's a meal. That's an instinctual thing on them. They're apex predators. Most types of fish have an apex predator type of attitude in some ways, but some are more predatory than others. Some are more opportunistic. Like bluegills and crappie, they're very opportunistic, but crappie tend to be more predatory than bluegills. There are times when bluegills will be aggressive enough to kind of cross that gap, but they're mostly opportunity feeders that see an opportunity and just snap it. So, and that's, anything I say is basically just my personal opinion based on my experience. So that's as far as cover goes. Bait balls is a little bit of a different situation. Most fish look up when they eat. If they're going to look at the bottom, they have to turn their bodies to look down because their eyes sit a certain way, okay? I would rather be below the bait ball because most fish will be below, that are eating them will be below them. So that my bait is making a presence more than what the bait fish is. Even if it's just one minnow, if it's appearing below the bait ball, which they instinctually know is doing that for protection, they're going to go after that. That's just my basic philosophy, really. Anything that's showing like it's injured or stranded and away from the group is going to get pilfered before anything else. That's just my philosophy. So when it comes to a bait ball, I'll either try to be at the perimeter of it, off the side, or directly below it. And I'll drop right through a bait ball because they won't separate much. They're trying to stay away from the fish. They won't really scatter if they're deeper. If they're on the surface, they will. And that's just kind of how I approach it. And a lot of that depends on whose boat you're on. It depends, because everybody that owns a boat will operate their boat a certain way. And if you're a backboater, you have to have the respect to let that happen because it's not your boat. If it's your boat, well, then it's a different situation. And most people that operate the boat and own the boat, they know that there's a certain way that that person that's going with them fishes, so they try to accommodate that most of the time. There's very few people in the boating world for fishing that are dill holes when it comes to fishing with somebody. There are a few that will turn so they get themselves the cast advantage, but that's fairly rare, really. So that's that portion. Rock face and bluffs. Now this is different than if you're just going straight down and dead sticking. Now, during the seasons, the differences are fairly minimal to me. I usually don't really move the bait that much, no matter how active they are, because I want them to think that it's either mentally unstable bait fish or it just needs to be eaten. The more you move something, if it's an aggressive fish, they might come into it. But to me, if I'm just sitting in front of them longer, they're just going to get to the point where they're just going to eat it because they're getting irritated at the fact it's in their presence. Most fish are very territorial, especially if you stick it on a nest during spawn. Good God, will they just beat the shit out of it. Anyway, with rock face and bluffs. Bluffs and rock faces have some similarities, but they're very distinct differences. To me, a rock face is any face of shoreline that has multiple boulders and rocks and some solid rock faces that come in and dip under. Okay, these are, especially during springtime, these are ripe with fish all in them, especially if you're going for panfish. And drop shot can be legendarily lethal on that situation. And you'll get in there and you just kind of throw towards shore and just kind of let it slowly come down and keep the line taut. Any situation where you're doing a drop shot, you want to keep the line tight. When you see the difference in the line, that's when you know something's hit. Or like with bass, a lot of times when they hit a finesse drop shot, they'll just put it in their mouth and they'll just kind of swim around. You'll feel that dead weight. That's when you pull up. So it's kind of the same thing. You're letting that line stay taut, and you're just kind of going with it. Reel a little bit. Let it keep going. Because on that arc, you're trying to go along with the drop-off of that shoreline or that rock face. If you throw it right against a bluff, which is basically a flat face, you can just let it zip right down from you, and you'll see your line start to get tighter as it goes deeper. If it goes along that bluff and it's hitting the side, or if it's right along the side of it, at some point in time, there's going to be pockets in those rock areas of that bluff. That's where fish are going to be hiding, depending on time of the year, to get out of the sun or to ambush something, and you're going to get hammered. And that's as simple as it is for those. Other shorelines like standing timber, things like that, you got to kind of interpret for yourself how would you cast that to not get snagged and still be in the presence of the fish. And with practice, you're going to be able to figure that out, really. It's not massive rocket science. It's more art. You're not going to be Einstein. You're going to be Shakespeare, basically. And my favorite method of all time, my favorite method with drop shot, without a doubt, is drop shot on a slip bobber. Why do I do this? Okay, well, I go for multiple species. Excuse me again. Good God, this thing. Whatever it is, man. Oh, good Lord. Ugh. See, even the orange doesn't. I usually suck down like a Powerade orange like there's no tomorrow, and it tastes nasty to me right now. I can't even eat right now. Anyway, I drop shot on slip bobbers because slip bobbers are you predetermining a depth where you think the fish are or find the fish. Oh, that felt good. See, that was a little bit of nice. And you try to entice them with whatever type of bait you have on the end. Now, with a drop shot slip bobber motion, you're having the weight on the bottom and spinning whatever the bait is, just like a drop shot, but you're predetermining the depth that it goes to. It can be really, really deadly. I've used it on everything from bluegill all the way up through flatheads. And the brand of slip bobber, well, I have a couple of them. Excuse me for a second. Excuse me. Yeah. Shit. Aha. Okay, so sorry about that. I was not prepared all the way. That is not an unusual thing for me. So, my primary panfish all the way through all but the biggest of live bait is a size 6 ESB, everlasting slip bobber. It has a machined in bead that's flat, and it has a metal ring to eliminate wear on the plastic tube. It is made with automotive bumper foam, which means that it is flotation-y as hell. I can put 5 number 5 split shots on the end of my line, and this will not sink. But the minute a fish takes it, it goes right in the water. It's a very big advantage for me. I can get 6 of these for like 14 bucks. You go and get the cheapest still, it's like 9 to 14 bucks. And by the way, when it comes to slip bobbers, ESBs and the Comal brand, which Walmart sells a lot of, are pretty much my standard fare, but it's 99% of the time this. And when I'm going for flatheads and catfish, a 9 to 12 inch version of one of these bets. These I can get for $4 for a 2-pack on eBay all day long. They're straight balsa with a tube, and they are a plastic tube through the balsa. So you have to use the bead on both sides, and you have to use a heavier swivel. But guess what? If you put your bait on the bottom, drop shot or not, you will see it instantly with these, because these things, when they stand up, it's unmistakable. So, but I'm talking about drop shotting slip bobbers right now. This is just showing you this is the biggest that I use. So what I have is this, okay? I'll have a rubber stopper, but I'm not going to pull it out right now, but I can get a 120 pack of the rubber slip bobber stops for like $7 on eBay. I do a lot of stuff on eBay, by the way. And I'll have the rubber stopper to whatever length. I'll have the bobber go on, and then I'll put it to a swivel. I usually have, I think they're size 8, 70-pound rated. They work all the way from light panfish all the way through the flatheads for me. And then it'll go down, and then I'll have my spin shot, and then I'll have my weight further down. So you always have to account for at least 2 to 3 feet from swivel to your drop shot weight. So if you're throwing shallow, you've just got to account for that and adjust accordingly on that. But these things are so light, and they have them all the way from size 1 to the size 6, which is the biggest one. But this thing floats a lot of stuff. It really does. It's pretty fantastic. Another thing, I might as well get into this now before I get to the last part of my thing here. Another thing a lot of people won't do on a drop shot, and I'm surprised that they don't. What you do is you take one of these, spinners, right? You take it off of whatever type of post that it's on. These ones just happen to be the beetle spin kind. You take it off. You take yourself one of those, well, right here, one of the split rings, right? This is a 70-pound rated, number 3 size. You'll take it, you put it in, and you can put it on the weight for your drop shot if you have one of those weights that has the swivel in it. So if you get a weight that's not a drop shot weight, but it's one that's got the swivel through it instead, kind of like the well, I'll give you an example. Kind of like one of these, but this is a really heavy catfish one. Kind of like these, but real small, that has the swivel out of both ends. And you attach it with one of these. Not only do you have your drop shot with your bait, but now you have a flasher. That's something not a lot of people do. And I mean, if you really think about that for a minute, now think about what precipitates a fish striking. There's a lot of factors, right? And you always want to look for a certain type of advantage, right? I mean, you really essentially do want to look for some type of advantage. So why not give yourself a flasher? It's almost like having a Roadrunner type jig, only you're just using it with a drop shot weight. So you're flashing it, so that flash is bringing fish to you. If it's low enough away from the bait, they're not going to, once they get into that zone, they're not going to concentrate as much on the flash anymore. They'll concentrate more on the bait depending on what size it is. So it's a great pull them in. And you'll sit there and just, you can barely pull it and those things will turn. I mean, they free turn on a swivel. They, especially the number 2, which is that size. Oh, I'm sure people go bigger. On a drop shot on a walleye, that would be freaking lethal, because walleye definitely go after stuff that's flashy. Oh man, do they. That's a well-known fact. Look at the half of the rigs that drag the bottom off for those things. And then after that, the last 2 things I want to talk about on a drop shot specifically. I love jerk baits. Steak baits, jerk baits, you know, I mean, there's different names that people give them, but essentially the same things. So this one, I have one swim bait that I'm going to show you that I have used on a drop shot actually, but the other ones are, I really started needing to rubber band things together, really. The hooks always get stuck together. By the way, I don't have somebody editing my videos ever. I don't have expensive software for editing. I just take it as it comes and I do it, okay? So if you see something funky, guess what? It's just the way that it happens. I like to use micro or ultralight finesse jerkbaits with a drop shot. Well, Ken, how would you do this, you might ask? Well, guess what? I'm going to tell you. What I do is this. I take my main line, I take it to a 3-way swivel, okay? I take my main tag off of there that's going to have the weight on the end of it. Predetermine what type of weight it is. Then I take either a floating or suspending jerkbait, depending on what I'm going to be around, whether it's rocks, open water, what have you, bait balls, and I put them on, and what happens is that weight pulls it down, but when you jerk it, it still does this. Still does this. So it looks like that injured bait fish. It is exceptionally lethal, and I should have done it yesterday. I really should have. Unfortunately, the problem I have is I don't have any more of those swivels, and I forgot to pick them up. So one of my baits is destroyed, unfortunately. That's going to go sit. Primarily, what I'll do is I'll get Rebel and Rapala finesse. This is a 2.5 inch, 3 inch range, standard shad looking. It's got that nice pronounced short lip. It doesn't go very deep, but this is a suspending one, not a floating one. And it's got the flash tag of the furry tinsely stuff at the end, which is a good thing to have on a micro jerkbait. It brings more attention. So I'll come down main line, have the 3-way split, have the weight off to one side, and then have a leader line uh, anywhere from 12 inches to 2 foot, depending on how far away from the weight you want it. I usually keep it around 12 to 14 inches tied and tie this on it. So what's going to happen is you're going to throw it out and that weight's going to carry it forward. The weight's going to go first. It always happens like that, right? Well, then you got this big weight that's pulling this relatively small mass down. So it goes quick and it's sitting there just doing this the whole time it's going down. It's an important factor to factor in because it's hitting that instinct. And if you're in a pot of fish, they are instantly going to be focused on something like that. If I had, well, let me see if I can get out with it being hooked. If I had this attached on my drop shot and that last fish had hit it, I would have had the fish because I have 2 hooks here. I probably would have gotten multiple fish on this if I'd have done this at the end of the day. Never thought about it, never took the box with me this time because I was busy thinking about drop shot. I never considered taking these. Stupid mistake. Because it does. It just draws them in. And then if you're trolling with a drop shot, it's just sitting there waggling the whole time. It's not the same as like a minnow sitting there because now you have the flash of an artificial in the tail. So it's going strictly on that that reaction strike as opposed to the, oh, look, it's lunch. It's a bit of a different bite. The other one that I do on a drop shot on occasion, and these are from Savage Gear. They're called Next Walkers. This is called a count shot, okay? And it's called a count shot because it has shot in it. It's really, really subtle, okay? But it's heavy for its size. This thing weighs, close to an ounce for as small as it is. But it glides really easy, and it's a slow sink. But it's multi-jointed. It looks like a thread fin in profile. And what I do is the same thing. I get that big weight, and I throw this on the same way. It drags out, it trails behind, and when I pull it, it has this really just slow, walky type swim bait thing to it, and it gets hammered. In fact, the small ponds, community ponds around the valley that have bass, these Next Walkers, wow, they pound them. But I'm talking drop shot right now, so I'm not getting into that part. So a lot of that is, kind of subjective opinion. It's kind of just the way that I roll. And I have one more thing to go through. My primary box is this one. Also, when you're a multi-species, multi-method person, it's always good to get a box, Plano, Flambeau, some of the more esoteric, more expensive brands, that you can fit all your stuff in. Your scents, a wipe rag, bagged bait, boxed bait. I keep my rubber bobber slops in all of my hooks and jig heads and spinner blades detachable and swivels and whatnot in one box. I keep all of my smaller soft plastics in another box. I keep all of my float oriented stuff or micro stuff in another box. It keeps it compartmentalized. I can go to it. I've kind of expanded my jig head line, so I've really got to get another box or one of my boxes set up just for that, or get an extra box. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do yet. So when you're drop shotting and you use a jig head for the weight, always use the naturalist color you can. Don't go for the glow chartreuse or the glow white. I love those colors, but if you're jig fishing, that's when you use them. When you're doing for drop shot, you're wanting to do natural. So my primary sizes are size 6, size 8, and I have those are like 124, 132nd. And I have 1/8 and 3/34, 3/32 ounce. So this is the 1/0. It is a sickle. Okay, I have keepers on all my jig heads. Always do a keeper on the jig head. See, there you go, the keepers. This is with glued on eyes and clear coated. Okay, that's the biggest I have, which would work great for bigger size bait for that. And then to the micros, which are more than enough weight to bring, you know, all the way up to a 3-inch bait down. If you're going to do a double rig like a minnow, you can do it that way. But only do that if you're either looking for an extra teaser or you're doing live bait, as far as I'm concerned. So that's jig head. So I've pretty much covered most of the stuff that I would cover. The very last thing I want to cover is scents. Not to be confused with scents, which most people don't have any of. And I will talk about my two primary ones that I use, just because of how stupendously effective they are. And also a couple of things that you should always have on you at all times on a boat. And this will include what I personally have typically on my person when I go fish. So I always will have an onboard bait knife. Just a cheap throwaway, has the de-scaly side, nice thin sharp blade. Doesn't have to be a super durable blade, it's just cutting bait. Okay, so unless you're getting into skipjack and whatnot, I mean, this will even cut through skipjack. So it's perfectly acceptable for that. And I think I just put it the wrong way. This was free with an order that I made, by the way, through eBay. Oh, that's another thing. Well, I'll get to that after this. Two things that I always keep in my tackle box. A needle nose with a wire cutting device and a wire cutting device. Those are two things I keep. You never know. They come in handy in a pinch. These need to be cleaned really bad, so I'm probably going to do that at some point when I feel a little bit better today. Some type of small blade that you can use in a pinch. You know, just kind of to scrape stuff off of lures and, you know, cut line. I mean, you never know. I mean, I also have nail clippers that I use for tag-ins and whatnot, but it's nice to have a cheap throwaway just in case you have to do something. You might have to dress the end of a rod to fix a rod tip. You should always have some type of a replacement rod tip kit available as well. The other thing that I have on me, I don't use the standard store-bought forceps unless they're the higher grade. These were given to me by a neurosurgeon. They're actually really super expensive, and that is actual gold plating, by the way. I'm not sure why he gave them to me, but he must have liked me. And they are very, very, very grippy. Stupidly grippy. I can get the biggest hook out of a flathead's mouth with these, okay? I like a flat face on my forcep. The reason for that is that I can grab the whole length of a hook and turn it this way, or I can grab it on the shaft, clamp down real hard. It just adds versatility that you normally wouldn't have. When they're in your bag, never have them clipped. Have them loose so that they don't lose that tension over time. It's a bad mistake. If you have them on your shirt or your other thing while you're using them, that's one thing. But storing them, no. No, no, no. Never do that. But always have the heaviest gauge that you can handle having, okay? If you have the heaviest gauge that you can handle having, you will have a better time of everything, and it will go better for you in general, okay? So, there's that. There's a company in Springfield, Illinois called Gourmet Baits. If you go online, please visit gourmetbaits.com or Google them. This is the standard original bait fish. The product I can't really describe anymore because I've gotten it so wet from dropping it in the water, putting it on my bait. Thank God it floated. Then it's missed. It smells very minnowy. It's actually got emulsified fish oil, some actual pieces of like minnow and stuff in it, and some other type of enzymatic things that trigger fish to strike. And that's what I have those classic drop shot worms in, actually, is this. Good God, does it fucking stink. And then there's this beast. Now, these are under pressure, okay? They're manufactured for a company called Rockfish Sports in Maryland, Crofton, Maryland. And I'm going to describe this to you. Now, it contains liquefied petroleum gas, okay? And there is first aid procedures on it because of the fact that it can have issues. It's called the fish bomb. It has UV enhancer in it, so it's very visible, okay? This is the extreme garlic flavored fish attractant. It's under pressure. It's really, really super stinky. You can spray it directly on baits and lures by pressing the valve button partially down and dispersing the contents in short bursts. Be careful not to fully depress it into the bomb mode. That's what I'm going to explain to you on this. To create an underwater chum slick, and these are not illegal, by the way, attach snap swivel to the hole on the side of the spray valve. While pointing valve opening over water and away from face and eyes, press the valve button all the way down, hooking the catch to start the flow of contents. Deploy the fish bomb canister into water and adjust weighted line to desired depth. You're weighting the line and dragging this down. You're drop shotting this can essentially into the water. See, even drop shotting a can of product in the water. It's hilarious. When the contents have fully discharged, the can will refill with water. Note, optimal canister temperature is between 40 to 90 Fahrenheit. I don't like getting it hot. It hurts when you grab it when it's hot. I did it last summer. It sucked. Okay. Warning, use only as directed. The fish bomb is not designed to be used on skin or clothing. I have gotten it on my skin and forgotten about it, and it does itch after a while because it's petroleum based. So, the advantage of this stuff, like it says, you can do a chum slick, okay? There's the hole for the snap swivel right in the side. You literally snap swivel onto the side of it. You push this thing all the way down, it locks. You're putting it toward the water. You have a length of line, okay, that you want the depth to be, which will depend on where you see the bait fish. And you can tie it off the side of the boat. And you can have a multiple length piece of line. Usually people use some type of rope, not just fishing line, okay? I mean, you can, but like the little paracord, you can get all the way up to like 100 foot. You can do it that way, okay? But you need to have a weight to take this down, because even though it's heavy, it still floats. But you get this all the way down, and it's done its duty, and you'll no longer see the chum slick, but it brings fish from all the fuck over. I have not done that yet, but I've seen it in action, and it is unreal what it does. Or you can just turn it down like this to your bait and squeeze it off a couple times, and you're good to go. It has UV enhancer in it, which makes any bait you put it on appear brighter in water that's not clear. It's an important factor. This is why these are currently the only two types of fish attractants I use, because I found them to be most effective. I used to use Baitmate. I've seen people that have used like slab slobber, crappie sauce, the other ones. I know they work, but because I'm drop shotting and I'm using other techniques that are fairly non-fish specific because I want to catch multiple species, I kind of tend to stick to more generalized sense, and these tend to work really good for me. That's just personal choice. I know slab slobber and those other ones work really good. I get it, and if I was going just for crappie, I probably would do that. And then the final point. There are people in the world, although I have not met them yet, that drop shot for flatheads, drop shot for shark, drop shot. I mean, they drop shot anything that uses live bait and or dead bait. Drop shot's actually a really good method, and to an extent is essentially the same as a dragger rig for blue cats. It really essentially is, because they do the same thing, and then they have a slide weight, or they have the bait past it, or they do their 2 to 8 ounce weight at the end, and then have the hook on a slide. I mean, there's different ways that they do it, but essentially it's close to the same. I have done it on occasion. I really have done it more when I've had like baby tilapia, baby bluegill. I tend to stick. The only reason I have these now is because they were cheap. I tend to use the Mustad Demon Perfect Circles. These happen to be a size 7/0 for flatheads. I've had them all the way to size 1. I got like a 20 pack of them that was 6 a piece for like $20 one time on eBay. But I try to stay in the 2 to 3/0 with the red hooks, and I tend to stay maximum of 5/0 in these because the 5/0s are still thin wire. When they get to the 7/0, then they're really thick wire. Even then, I do like 1 to 3/0 usually, and I just don't have those hooks anymore. And I do these on a drop shot as well. I do it on a drop shot. You got to use a lot more weight, and that's when you get into, as I was saying, only use like medium heavy or heavier when you're going into cover. That's one of those circumstances where that kind of comes into play as well. And you're definitely holding on for dear life if something is enticed, because at that point in time, just like with regular drop shot, your bait is suspended up higher than where the weight is. With catfish, a lot of times people put the weight on the bottom and let the fish come up, but you're literally suspending it and either dragging it or just dead sticking it. And I've got to be completely honest and upfront. My opinion is that flatheads, well, they'll take something off the bottom, or they'll come up and grab something that's kind of swimming up off the bottom because it looks like it's injured. I think, just like channel cats, they are just as apt to pop something that's suspended right in their face. I'm sorry, I just believe that. You know, the bluegills that come up and they flash around because they're on that line and the weight's holding them down, yeah, they're going to come up and get that. But I think it's just as effective and easier if it's a drop shot version of it. And that's really just my opinion. So there's a whole myriad of different ways that you can do the drop shot thing for sure. But, you know, depending on where I'm going, my majority time is one of those ESB slip bobbers and a drop shot. I really just love that method because it doesn't matter what bait. I could even put nasty ass hot dog with black cherry Kool-Aid like I do on any other rig on drop shot, and the fish will attack it. So I hope that kind of gives some perspective. I know it's been a while. It took me a while to do this video. I feel like crap, so I'm going to go lay down now.